Hey y'all. Welcome to a new session that I've never done before. I wanted to experiment with doing some live sessions, and I was fooling around with a game the other day that caught my eye because I've been playing around with the line renderer recently, and I thought it'd be cool if we made some games using that tool. And I came across this game called Sugar Game, and I'm gonna pull it up on my screen in a moment. But there's a clever mechanic, and it's really simple. Like you just draw on the screen, and the outcome is that it becomes an object or a solid object that other object other objects that get spawned in the scene interact with it, and basically you create barriers and help those objects fall into certain goal areas. And we're looking at Illustrator right now, but I want to pull up the game itself. And so I have this on my phone at the moment, and you can see, if you probably played this game before, it's really simple, and is also really elegant at the same time. It has a clean interface. There's a few options you can see on the screen. There's a big play button right in the center, and then you can select different levels. And I've played through it a few times just to get the feel of it, and that's when it caught my eye. There's some options menus, and uh, you can see that the visuals are very clean. And these simple mechanics, simple clean games, oftentimes in 2D, catch my eye. And so if we go into hit play, then we're presented with some particles that start falling down, and then it looks like a coffee mug with a number on it. And uh, the whole point of the game is that you draw on the screen something that will help maybe catch those grains and push it down. And if you realize, oh, I screwed up, then you have more chances to do it correctly. But eventually, you know, that bottom platform down here caught enough grains, and based on the physics of the game, those particles start falling down, and this number starts to decrease. This game has some ads on it, which we'll sort of ignore. And as soon as that number goes down to 0, then you see that play button gives you the option to just automatically go to the next level. And so that's pretty nice. And it's all about you drawing on the screen uh, a platform that will allow your particles to fall down, and you can draw on top of them. And then if you realize, oh, I've made it impossible for myself to accomplish this goal, then you can hit the reset button. It seems like my mic is kind of hot, so I'll give you one moment. Hello. Okay, maybe that's better. You can hit the reset button, and then it clears what you've drawn out. And there's other games like this that's I see floating around, like the bees game that go along and sting your characters. And the whole point is that you want to create a boundary that prevents the bees from stinging you. And you can see that the grains sort of fall and then they stop. I think eventually, do they come back out? It seems like they don't. So it's not an unlimited opportunity for this game. Eventually, you have certain grains that fall out, and then if you don't accomplish it within that grain limit, not a time limit for this type of game, then you have to reload it, and then more grains will fall out. So you have to sort of keep track, like, oh, I have enough that are going to be filling up this mug over here, and when that's done, then I'll shift over and focus on this other mug. What's nice about this is that the level design is pretty simplistic. You have different areas that you can put the goal areas for your grains, and level to level, the previous area was just a square or a rectangle, and now there's a little platform on this left side for this mug over here. And we can see in another level, oh great, there's an ad. I'm gonna turn this off so we don't give this other game more airtime. Maybe we'll talk about that game later. And let's go and sketch some of the things about this game. So part of it is that the main mechanic is player draws, And because of those drawings, draws lines. And because of those lines, those lines become colliders, or have some sort of colliders to them. And they become barriers and platforms for grains to fall. In later stages, you can swap the physics of these grains. Let's see if I can pull this back up. Is this ad gone yet? It's not. Oh, it's finished. Cool. And if we hit play, you'll notice now that the mug is now on the ceiling, and the grains have been falling down. But the cup is obviously inverted, and if I hit this up and down arrow, this red button, you can see that the grains start going in the opposite direction. The level doesn't rotate or anything, but the grains have their gravity basically inverted. And the whole goal is we want to get back in the grains as if we were going in the opposite direction. So if we go back to our notes, then we can add that as a feature. Grains fall based on direction of gravity. So some goals are, only one main goal, have fill the mug with enough grains. Some of the UI is display remaining required grains, and then when you accomplish, then there's an option to advance to next level. So part of this for me is I want to set a goal. It's my time is 10:40. I want to set a time limit to see if I can accomplish all of this, or some of this, not all of this. That would be silly. In 1.5 hours. So I have a timer right here. I'll set on Google, and I'm just going to hit start, and let's see if we can replicate this. And I've sort of been experimenting with Sprite Renderer, but I want to start out as a clean project and sort of go through some of this process. And if I have to look up something, then I'm going to look up something that's part of the natural process of making things. And hopefully this is a learning process for myself and for those of you who are also watching along. Okay, so just quickly review. Let's start out by looking at some of this. We want to be drawing some things, and I know that we're going to be dealing with the line renderer. And that's the drawing part, right? And oops, that's some of the code I was working with earlier. We want to do line renderer. And after that, then we want to turn them into, we want to add a collider. Then the part that we want to have things falling, then we want to possibly spawn or instantiate some sort of grain. And these grains follow physics somehow. We'll say that we will be using physics, and so some of the things that we need are going to be a rigid body. They're going to need a collider. Will affect things like gravity scale. And once we hit the goals, then we'll have a mug object and mug collider, and on, let's say on destroy. We're going to keep it simple. We're not going to do object pooling, but we'll say on destroy, then we'll count, we'll add, we'll subtract the number of grains remaining. The spawner should, we notice that if we look at this one more time, that the grains, when they fell, they didn't just come out of the spout in a straight line. There's a little oscillation to it. And so we can make it so that they distribute themselves a little bit left to right. It seems like these particles fall also once they come out here with a little bit of an angle. You can see that it spreads, and so maybe we can figure that out. I think that it will be pretty easy to make an object that sort of rotates and pushes these objects out. So it might not be a complete remix of this game, but we can do something similar to that. So for the, what do we have the spawning? Spawning will have a little bit of rotating. Spawn grains with some rotation. Cool. I think that those are some goals that we can get close to accomplishing. Let's see if we can do this and get it done. Cool. I'm gonna close this. We might come back to this later. We'll have these notes right here as a reminder, and those will come back in a little bit. I'm gonna pull up Unity. Where's Unity? Great. I have an empty project, and some of the packages that I've already incorporated is, I think that I'm going to be using some 2D sprites, and so I think I have 2D sprites on here. I don't, but we can add that in a little bit later. Cool. And I am going to be using Writer, but you don't need to do that for this project if you're following along. So let's back up a little bit. Close this. Great. So let's start out with the first thing. Let's experiment with the line renderer. And I'm going to create an object here, and this is going to be our drawing object. This is going to take in some input from our player, and once they touch on the screen, we want to be able to draw some things. So let's go and create a new script. Computer's thinking really hard. Let's go script, and this is going to be touch line. If you've seen my previous video before, I'll link it to when I have this go finished. I'll have a link to my other video about LineRenderer, or using LineRenderer to draw things. So the main component for this touch is actually the user input and less about the line renderer, because we'll have a separate script to draw a line renderer. We know that for one object, it can only have one line renderer, so we can't have multiple line renderers in one single object. So ideally, in my opinion, what we would do in this scenario is that every time that we touch on the screen, we'll instantiate a new line object that's going to have its own line renderer. So that'll allow us to have several lines on the screen, and this drawer basically registers touch and then instantiates a new line object. So let's talk about what we need to do to make that happen. So I'm going to open up that script, and we are going to start out with, we know that we have to base our drawings of touch on what the camera sees and then put them into the 2D space. And so the most important thing that we need at the moment is our camera. So we'll say camera, lowercase m camera, because the other, if we use lowercase c camera, then we might be accidentally hiding the camera's own camera property. And we need to point this camera variable to our main camera. So on awake, we are going to check to see if our camera has a reference to our main camera. If not, then we're going to assign the reference to our main camera here, and then we'll be able to use this later on in an update. Cool. And then inside update, then we're going to be, this is where we're going to be checking for our touches, our mouse down and our fingers down. And we'll start here. We'll say if we're going to use the old input system input get mouse down. And this is going to be this basically in other programming scenarios. This is going to be like the start of a touch. And so we'll say something like spawn, instantiate, and set up a new line object. And the other instance is after we've started the touch, while we're drawing, we're going to update the position of our finger to that line object. So this is going to start out with input dot get mouse button like this. And we're looking for the first mouse button. If we hover over here, we can see that what's the difference between mouse down. So this is the time when we initially place the mouse down. Returns true when the frame user pressed the mouse button. And here we're saying returns whether the given mouse button is held down. So while we're holding down, that's when we want to be having the drawing. Before we reference another script where we're going to be sending those values, then we can create a vector2 variable, which is going to be basically the mouse position. And we're going to get that vector2 value by converting what we see from the mouse position into the world space. And so we'll say our camera, we're going to convert the screen to world point based on the input of our mouse position. That should be right. And then next line is when we have this new script, we're going to send those values over to it. Cool. And for the moment, that's what we need so far. And what we're going to do next is we're going to create another object now. We can go back into Unity. And we are going to create a new object. We're going to go plus empty object. And this is going to be our line object. And our line object is going to hold the line renderer. And if you ever used the line renderer before, then there's many parameters to it. The most important things that we're going to be dealing with is it's going to take in some points. That's going to draw some lines between there. We can define the color. We can also define the width. We're not going to use anything like lighting in this case. We're not going to receive shadows. Cool. And I know that for going back to our notes, we want to be adding a collider. And in this case, I found that a 2D edge collider is the easiest to use because we can feed in the position values onto the edge collider. So we'll go edge collider 2D. And you can see that it has a points property, and this is a list of or an array of objects that we can points that we can add to. So we'll take in those line renderer points and then we'll send them also to the edge collider, and so both will be hopefully in the same spot when we have this finish. And cool, so now that we have this object, we're going to eventually turn this into a prefab, and we're going to add its own script, which is going to receive those points in space and then render that as a line and then add that edge collider to it. So we're going to go new script and we're going to call this one line and collider. I'm not going to try not to be too fancy and not too clever at the moment. I feel like we should be able to accomplish most things without breaking too many rules today. Okay, so we'll go serialized field. Some of the things that we said that we could be using is a color to define our line. Some other things might be our line width. So these are parameters that we will define. and actually we can set some defaults, and then the drawer might send some updates depending on maybe a different level has a different color to it. And then some properties that we're going to use is we're going to create a list of vector2 values, and that's going to be the points that we're going to use for the renderer as well as the collider. Then we're going to obviously have a reference to our own line renderer. That's going to be this object itself, on the object itself, a component that's on this object. And we're going to use edge collider 2D, and this is going to be edge collider 2D. Again, not trying to keep it as simple as possible. We're going to use awake today, and we are going to, whenever this line renderer gets instantiated, we want to just clear out the 2 points, because you noticed that going back into Unity, the line renderer might have had some points on here. It has a size of 2. You can see 0 and then this other point here. And then also with the edge collider, it also had some points as well. And we want to, right when we first enter the scene, we want to clear those points out. So we'll say this is going to be cleared. And then we're also going to tell the edge collider to reset itself. Great. And from there, we can tell this is more of resetting aspects. We're going to tell the position count to be 0. We don't want to have any more because we just cleared it. Well, this is the list that we created here, and on the line render itself, we want to clear those points out. So we set that point count to 0. It's going to eliminate any of the points within the line render component. And then we're going to set the start color to be our line color. No, ooh, let's see, am I messing up? No, that's correct. So line color, line renderer, end color is also going to be line color. What else? We're going to set the width of they have start width and end width. And we're going to set our use world space to be true. True. There we go. Okay, so this all happens when we have a new instance of our line object in the scene. Great. What is this upset about? Okay, it's never used. That's okay. And then we're not going to be using an update for this object because we are going to allow the touch line object to then send in values. And so we're going to create 2 public methods, and one of them is going to be start line, and that's going to take in some new parameters if we want to, mainly because different scenes or levels might have a different color to them. We can define new line color, and then we can also define, if we want to, the new line width. So as soon as we start touching, ideally we can tell the line object to change its color, and it's going to look something like this. Oh, I screwed up right here. Points should be initialized here, so points should be new vector2 like this. And then here is when we say points is clear, because we haven't created a new instance of this vector2 list. We can't actually clear it until we create that. Okay, and we'll move this one down here too. So I accidentally put this in 2 spots, in the wrong spot. And we'll have line renderer is going to be get component line renderer. We need to grab that when we wake up. And edge collider 2D is get component. So sorry about putting things out of order in the video, But when we wake up, we want to create a new instance of this list and grab the line render and the edge collider that are associated on this object, and then get those references to each other. And then we can set the defaults or reset them right there. Cool. And this portion is kind of maybe redundant and maybe probably unnecessary, but we can set the new start color to the new line color. So we can do like that. So this part could go away. I think when I was experimenting with the other video, I thought it was important, so forgive me for that. New line color, line renderer dot start with. That's going to be new line width, and basically this is allowing us to change these between scenes or new scenes. And I think that's it. So new color, new width. We reset everything. Great, great. So we have a start line, and then this other one is the most important one. And this is going to be add point. And this is where the line object itself is going to take in new vector2 points and then update both the line renderer and the collider component. And so it's going to be a type of vector, and we'll call it point. All arguments are going to come in as a point. So we create that parameter point. So if points dot count is greater than, we'll ignore this step right now. We'll talk about that logic in a second. But the whole point is that we have this collection of points, this list of points here, and we're going to tell points to add the new incoming point to that list. From there, we need to tell the line renderer dot position count to be the new count of points. So again, this collection that's separate from the line renderer itself dot count. And there we will we need to set the position of some of our points. And basically it's going to add to the end of our line renderer's points collection. Line renderer position count -1, and this is going to be the new point. So it's basically saying we have a new vector2 of the point. This is the point that we're touching, and we're setting the position of it at the latest possible spot. And we'll set a conditional if points that count is greater than 0, then we will tell the edge collider to update its points collection to be equal to our objects list of points as an array. So the edge collider over here has a points collection. You can see it's 2D, and we want to feed it the values that are from our collection in here, which we have been adding at this stage. Whenever we touch down, we're going to call this add point, and it's going to be adding to that point as a list. And we need to convert that list to an array so that the edge collider can understand those values. Great. So this is pretty much complete at this point, and we know that we've added it to an object that we're going to turn into a prefab. Now let's come back into our touch line object, because we have to give we need to have a reference to this script, or an instance of this script, when we first touch. Okay. Coming back over here, we created some variables here, and we should have references to them over here, because we can decide how we want to change the color over on this end. This is going to be more of like a managerial object that will handle instances of this line and color. And this is going to be float. This is going to be line width. We'll be able to see these in the inspector and change them to how we want. And here is going to be a reference to the prefab that we're going to be using. And instead of using game object, the only thing that I care about is this line and collider. And sometimes you might see people use game object and call this the line object. And this can be a drag because invariably, in the end, we're going to use line object and do something weird like line object.getComponent and then zero in on this line and collider script in the anyways. So rather than doing that, we don't need to, we can skip a step and not call it a game object because we don't need to deal with other components of this larger game object. The only thing that I really care about is this line component. And so this is why I set up the type for this. And so we're going to say new line. And when we instantiate the new line object, we can actually just hold the reference to this thing in the script. You'll see in a moment. So we don't need start. And we're going to refine this area right here. So once we initially put our new our finger to the screen, we want a new line object, and we want to instantiate it at this moment over here. And we have a reference variable that has no reference to it right now at this given time. It doesn't know which one it is, and what we want to do is assign a new reference to it after we instantiate a new line object. Forgive me, we don't want to call it new line right there. We want to call this private line and collider line object. So we'll have a reference to the line object here. So the line object reference is going to be the instance of a new line like this. And where we put it doesn't really matter too much because we're going to be feeding in values of where it looks. So this object could be floating almost anywhere, but I'm just going to set it to be positioned at 0, 0, 0, and then have a rotation of non-rotation. So these two components are sometimes necessary, but I'm just feeding them to be default in one spot, 0, 0, 0, no rotation, but we are creating a new reference to this line object. And then we're going to manipulate that line object right after this. Okay, so we have this new line object right here. We just instantiated it. We called it line object. And that's when we want to call its start line function here. And that basically just resets the object and eliminates any possible points that come with it. So we'll say line object start line. And at this point, we will feed it those values of new line color and new line width because this is when that object can know that, oh, this is a new scene. Maybe we're using a new color for our line, and maybe we're using a new width for our line. So this is basically the setup of the new line object. And then here, we're going to take in that mouse point as we start holding our mouse. And then that's going to extend our line and extend our colliders along with it. Here we're going to, since we have a reference to the line object because the button down occurs before the button hold, we could do a check if we wanted to at this point. In this case, I'm just going to plow ahead and avoid that. We're going to call the add point method here. And then this is where we feed in that mouse point. It's converting where we're touching on the screen to the world space, and then we can take that information and add it to our line renderer and our edge collider as well. Let me take a quick glance at the clock. Let's see, do I have it pulled up? Where are you? Okay, I have 1 hour and 3 minutes left, so let's keep going. And so we call the add add point, and all of this should be going. One last thing that we want to check is as we are, let's just try it. Let's try it. There's going to be a quality of life thing that I want to add to this in a moment, but we'll make it all work. So I'm still in the sample scene. I probably should have called it something else, but we have this drawer and we can set the color to what we want. And we make sure that I turn up alpha to not 0, because if we just leave it like that, then the lines may not show up. So I'm pulling in the alpha level all the way up to 255. In this case, we want it to be red, and I'm just going to set this to be about 0.4. Cool. Down here is going to be this new line is, let me turn on my cursor. Here is going to be a reference to the prefab, which we haven't turned in. We don't have any prefabs at the moment. We're going to go over here to our line object, and we've added the line renderer to our line object and our edge collider. We can set some defaults. Let's say that by default, if we don't change the color, it's going to be black. We'll turn the alpha up to 255. Also, the width, let's just make it be something really fat, just so that we know that this other code is working. What else do we need? We need to have this object do anything else? I don't think so. So let's just drag it into our project window. We'll turn it into a prefab. Line render, a couple things. Let's see. We'll eventually adjust things like sorting layer because we might have a background to our game, and we'll adjust how things get rendered or the order that they get rendered. Cool. Now that we've created this into a prefab, we can delete this instance here because we want to have a reference to the prefab in the project window. Here we'll drag in the line object and we'll hit play. Let's see if this works. I'm in game mode and we're drawing and it's following the shape of my mouse. And we can quickly peek over here to our hierarchy. We can see that there's 2 clones, and examining the object here, this squiggly one, we can see that there is an edge collider that's inside the bounds of our line. That looks great. And this other one is very similar. One thing that we could do now is sort of fool around with it. Once you get a chance to, you could, during this replay, you could thin out the line width and hit play. I didn't double check. Did it come out to be red? I didn't look. I was sort of ignoring everything. So it's pink. So we need to go back to our line object, and what is missing at the moment? We can go over here to our line renderer, and we need to give it a material. And let's do default line, default dash line. So how do I do that? I went over here to the bullseye, clicked on this, and that should display our color correctly because we're not using any fancy lighting. There we go. Cool. And let's check one more time. Oops, didn't mean to hit all those buttons. One thing that's going to be the quality of life that I mentioned is that once I'm holding my mouse right here and then move it again, I'm going to hit pause and then look at these lines. And you'll notice that some of these points are repeats of each other. And that could be unnecessary. We can sort of filter those repeats out, especially when they're right after each other. So we can come back to our code. And I think that's the final edit that we need for this part of the code. And once we go to add point, we need to have a little filter right there. Where did I put it? Here it is. So if we go to if, saying that we're going to examine the point that's coming in, and we haven't added it to our collection yet, and we're going to say that if the collection of all points that we've already collected right here, at the most recent value, if we have more than one value, then that's going to be the first consideration, because if we don't have any existing points, we don't care about this next check. If that's the case, then let's see if the point that's coming in does it equal the most recent value, and the most recent value of our vector2 list called points. So we'll look at points, and we want to see at the last value if it's the same one. If it is, then we want to ignore the rest of this code, and we'll just simply tell it to return. If you're not familiar with this expression right here, this is basically saying that look at the last item of this collection. This is the list is an enumerable type, and we can say that I can get the last one. And this is probably save you a lot of time, because normally you might do something like count -1, right? And Writer is pretty clever, and it says, oh, let me give you some advice. Let's rewrite this as an index from end expression, right? So we're saving characters and maybe some trees by doing it this other way. Caret symbol 1. Great. Now let's test this out, because let's look at the time. 56 minutes. Cool. Moving ahead, let's go back to Unity, and we're going to examine it this time when we draw onto the screen. We'll look at, I'll move the mouse around, pause it for a second, and then examine. I'm going to let up now, and we shouldn't see any repeats or back-to-back repeats. That's the most important thing. So there are some that are staying the same in one certain access, but we shouldn't see any repeat values. Cool. Let's do one more check now. So we have this drawer object, and that's basically going to allow us to do all the touches. We could do something too if we want to change up the remix, in that there's a maximum number of lines, but at this point it's not really necessary. But let's create an object that could be an instance of our grain. And so let's call this grain. And this grain is going to be, let's look back at our notes. We basically fulfilled these areas right here. And grains to fall based on direction of gravity, and spawn a grain at some rotation. Grains follow physics, have a rigid body, collider, and a gravity scale. So let's do this portion of it before we back up and do the higher level stuff. And come here to our grain. We know that this grain is going to have some visual component. We'll use sprite renderer. And let's pick a basic one, one that comes along with all Unities, the knob. And we'll add I think that in the original game, movie recording, let's look at my phone one time. If we look over here, then if I hit reset, these grains look kind of, are they square or are they circle? They look kind of square. So maybe we can make them look like squares, but at the moment we'll start with knobs, and we'll start with circle objects. This could be our remix, in that we make them circles rather than squares. Unity is being a little upset right now, maybe because I have too many windows open, and we're going to add a circle collider, maybe with the intention of changing it later. And we can see that it's pretty close to the shape of our collider, or of our sprite. We could adjust that if we want to. We'll leave it the same right now, trying to go fast. And last thing that we said on our list is that it follows physics, so we'll add a rigid body 2D. And cool, right now the gravity scale is set to 1. What we could do is we'll set this grain sort of back it up, and I'm going to elevate it right here, and then I'll set the gravity scale to 0, and just so that it's suspended in air. And we'll make a couple lines, and we'll see how they interact, because that's really what the main gameplay is. And now I'll select this grain and I'll turn on gravity scale so that it's now should start to fall. Okay, so you see that there are some parts, oh, it's still moving too, that it seemed like it just totally ignored the edge colliders. We can increase its awareness by changing the collision detection from discrete to continuous. Let's see if that makes a difference. It just sat there. Let's try again. Maybe I made that platform too flat. I didn't freeze the rigid body in a certain axis, so that's interesting. My first draw is not getting rendered at the moment. I wonder what's going on. I thought that it was because I have 3 line objects. We'll see. Maybe I'll research that later. Okay, so this thing is not moving, but let's see what's going on. Can we add anything to our colliders to make this a little bit more smooth? Because it is running into our object, but if I move it, oops, not that one. Let's see, I must be forgetting something. Let's try one more time. Let's just not draw anything for the moment, and then we'll turn on this. We'll turn on the grain, and okay, great, fall straight through. Okay, that's not bad. Don't know why the original couple weren't working, but it seems like it's working okay now. You can see that the grain is falling. Awesome. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. And so we've basically fulfilled the grain falling, those aspects right here, follows physics. We can adjust some physics in later. We can either do it within all the rigid bodies, or we can go into the project window of Unity, go into project settings, and physics 2D. We can change the direction of our gravity if we wanted to that way too. So we can do positive 9.8, and if once we turn that into a positive value, you'll notice that once I turn on the gravity scale for this individual grain, then it's going to go up. And that sort of replicates what was happening when we hit that up and down arrow. I'm going to change this back to the default. And so what do we need to do next? We can do add some niceties. We can create the spawner now. Why don't we do the spawner? We can go here and we're going to create a new object. And we'll saw the grain spawner. We'll take this grain and we're gonna make it into a prefab. Sorry about my file management. We can clean it up in a moment. Ideally, we want to be making it clean at the start. I acknowledge that for sure. But for the time being, we're just gonna roll with it. And so we'll call this grain spawner here. And let's talk about what might happen. We know that in this game there was a little spout, and then later there's some sprites that look like hands. But let's go and give it a a location in space. So this grain spawner is going to, it's going to want to know a transform location. So we'll say transform, capital T transform, and this is going to be spawn point. And the next one is going to be the object itself. In this case, we're going to swap out what I said because we're not going to actually affect any code, or before we were editing, calling methods inside the line and collider script. And in this case, we only care about the grain object, I think. I haven't really thought about this far. This is why we're doing it live. Say grain, and let's say an update. We'll leave it an update right now. We're going to say instantiate grain. It's going to look like a big mess, but we'll figure it out. Quaternion.identity. Let's see, does it like that? What does? Are we missing anything? I don't think we're missing anything. Spawn point. Oh, since we just said transform, this second parameter, the argument needs to have spawn point dot position, because I was just feeding the transform and didn't know specifically what we're dealing with. Great. So let's go back to Unity, and this is going to be a big mess. Oops, I turned it position. Should we just say positions? All right. Now that we have this grain, we turn it into prefab, so we can get rid of this particular one. Go to grain spawner. Let's create a third object, and this is going to be called spawn point. And this could be an object somewhere else in space. We're going to add a little icon to it because we're going to do something different in a moment. But the spawner needs to know where that actual spawn point is going to be, because we're going to move it around in space. And then we want to know the grain itself. I'm going to hit play. There's no check to it. It should just automatically spawn a whole bunch of grains. You can see that it populated the hierarchy really, really quickly. I'm going to go back to the grain, and we're going to set their gravity scale as soon as they're spawned to have a gravity scale of 1. Great. Okay, so now it's spawning really, really quickly. Let's go back here. We know that this part works. Maybe let's create an enumerator. Enumerator, we'll say that this is going to be spawn grains. And we're basically going to have this, and we'll say while, I don't know, while spawning, while we be spawning, and this is going to be a let's say private bool spawning, and while we are spawning, then we will be calling that instantiate, and let's create another field, and we're going to say that this is going to be spawn interval. This is going to be the time it waits between spawns, so that, what is it? Yield, return, new. What am I saying wrong? wait for seconds, spawn interval. Great. So we're going to do grain, wait, grain, wait, grain, wait, grain, wait. And cool. And we'll do spawn grains here. And at the moment, we're not going to wait at all. We're just going to call this spawn grains. That's not the way you call coroutines. We say start coroutine and spawn grains. Okay. We're going to eliminate update for the moment. I don't think we're going to need it. And why don't you like this? Well, you want lowercase g grain, so we'll just rename it lowercase g grain. Cool. This is our spawn grain spawner. Let's check the time. 41 minutes. We're doing okay. And go back to the grain spawner. And the spawn interval, let's set it to be a large value, just so that we know that it's working. I want to make it obvious. Let's see. I lost the reference to the grain object. Did I do that? Okay. Oh. When we are gonna go back to here and we'll just turn spawning back to true. So we never set spawning to be true, so we never entered this code block at the moment. Later on we'll have a slight delay and then actually turn that spawning bool to be from false to be true. Great, and let's see if we can draw. We can draw. Okay, let's do it one more time. Let's move up this spawn point. Oh, not the spawner, the spawn point. Let's move it up a little bit higher. And then maybe we'll draw a couple sprites. Great, great, great. Okay. Getting close, and what can we do next? So some visual things. Let's touch up some of the visual things. You can see that this last playthrough that the grains and the balls, grains and the lines were kind of not really even. Let's do two things that I'm now sort of thinking on the fly. Let's change the drawer so that the line width is slightly thinner. So we're going to have that. And then we're going to change the line object itself, and we're going to create a couple sorting layers. We're going to have, because we're going to add some more visual elements soon, we're going to have background, and maybe the level. Then we might have lines. Then we'll have grains. And if it matters, then we'll put UI there. Great. And then we'll come back to the line object. We're going to set its sorting layer to lines. And then we're going to go to the grain prefab, and we're going to set its sorting layer to grains. Awesome. Great, great, great. This is turning out pretty good. And how much time do we have left? ideally we want to have at least 2 playable levels, and so we can deal with some UI too. So let's go into Illustrator for a moment. We have this circle that I was using for my mask through OBS, but let's create a couple things. So let's create a spout, and in the original game they had something that looked, I don't know, rounded rectangle, something like that. And we're just gonna, no, let's do it this way. Rectangle. Take this guy and I'm just gonna expand it like, I need to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm just making it tapered so it looks like a trapezoid. 1, 2. Great. And then I will take this and give it a little bit of curve. I'm gonna swap this out, and so it has it's white. I know that I'm gonna make this a PNG, and let's just make. I know I'm gonna slice these things up. So let's just say that the spout is gonna be white. The coffee mug is gonna be white as well. Let's grab this thing. Let's make it like this. Let's just give it some color so I can see it well enough. And let's do this and do another one. This will be the handle. Just want to be able to see. Let's line it up. I want to go quickly, line it up like this, and we're gonna pathfind this bad boy. Okay. Now we're gonna take this one and curve out the corners. Great. How big is the spout? The spout is okay. Handles like this. We're going to adjust this mug a little bit. Okay. And we're going to set this one over here, set this one over here. We're going to make this white. We said that the goal objects are going to be white. Oh, I can unite this. Great. So we have a spout, we have a coffee cup. Let's define the overall level, and we'll add this one a little bit bigger. I kind of like how it was shaped like this, and we're going to give it some colors. So let's create a red level, and let's give it a curve before I recolor them. I'm going to dupe and recolor them, something like that. Great. And make another one. This is going to be blue level. This one's going to be a green level. Okay. I'm hoping that I'm not forgetting anything. I'm going to hit export for screens. I'm making sure that it's a PNG. Hit export to board. Oh. And this is going to be sugar sprites. I only care about this artboard. Export. Sugar sprites is right here. Great. And we'll come back over to Unity. Find that last thing. Drag it into my messy project folder. Go over here. Pray that I have the sprite editor installed. I think I do. Sprite editor. Sprite 2D UI. Multiple. Sprite editor. Apply. Great, we'll slice these ones up. Go automatic. Apply. Awesome. Okay, let's see if we can set up the level. Let's change this to, let's see, full HD. Yeah, sorry, I'm Vaseline, couldn't decide. So cool. Now we have our level. This is where our play area is going to be. This is going to be level. We can reset its transform. Great. And let's go and add our spout. Okay, it's very big. We'll just leave it there for that size at the moment. And let's add our coffee cup. I had made this 0.5. Let's also make that 0.5. Awesome. So we have basic layout right now. We're going to add this spawn point over here. You can see that things sort of changed at that when we hit play. Unity sort of updated itself. Let's put the level, let's change the sorting layers. So let's hit the level to level, and we'll put this one, let's rename this to be spout. And we'll add that sorting layer to be, I don't know, lines. I should have put a new sorting layer in there. And this is going to be cup. And this is also going to be lines. Okay, great. We're getting there. Let's see how much time do I have left. 30 minutes. Super. Feeling pretty good now. Now let's do, what do we want to do? We said that there was one aspect that I might feel kind of tricky about, and this is going to be the grains fall with some rotation. So right now we have a fixed point, this spawn point right here, and I think that this is, in order to keep things interesting, we want to have this sort of go back and forth. And so we can imagine an invisible point here for the spawn point to be sitting on, and it rotates itself like this. So here, the spawn point, we're going to add it to a new empty object. And so this is going to be, let's say, spawn nozzle. There's going to be an invisible spawn nozzle, and this spawn point is going to be sitting on top of it. And let's just make sure that I reset everyone's transform so they are in good relation to each other. Okay. Okay. And let's say the spawn nozzle is here. Just for the sake of argument right now, I'm just going to add the nozzle onto here. Where are you at? Sprite. Let's go like this. Sprite renderer. Oh, why am I doing this? I'm so dumb. We have, no, let's keep it like that. Here, we'll go here. I apologize for backtracking and then unbacktracking. We're gonna add, okay, cool. And I'm just gonna make this is just for us to see at the moment, because we will eventually delete this, not have a visible part to it. But what I want to do is I want to have the spawn point be at the lower end of the spawn nozzle. And during the gameplay, when we're spawning, I want this to be rotating along the z-axis, kind of like this. And when that's happening, then the grains will come out of the spawn point at a slight angle. Well, I hope that you get that idea. And what we can do is let's take this spawn nozzle and we're just going to move it over here like this. Just a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to write a little bit of code that's going to rotate the spawn nozzle where the spawn point currently lives on. Okay, so we'll go to spawn nozzle and we're going to add rotate nozzle. And it's just going to be a couple lines of code, really, really, really simple. I think that if we could clean things up, then we might attach it to this grain spawner, and that controls all of it. But for the time being, we'll just add it to this object itself. We had more time to plan out the system, then we will probably find the most efficient and ideal scenario. So rotate nozzle. We're going to come over here. We're going to eliminate the unnecessary events, and so serialize field, private, float, and this is going to be the angle or the maximum angle that we want this nozzle to change. And maybe in different levels it might be a different value, but we want to be able to control that somewhere. And so based on that, basically I'm going to take time and just allow a value to continually add. And we're just going to create boundaries that are going to set our angle of our nozzle. So we'll say angle equal to math f dot ping pong, and that's going to allow us to go from one boundary to the next. And we're going to use time as our constant accumulator. And we're going to have another value, and this is going to be float, and this is going to be angle speed. This is going to allow us to say how fast. We have the angle boundary, how wide it can swing, and then how fast we move between those boundaries. So the angle speed, and then here is going to be the maximum angle. And from there, we're going to have our transform, which is going to be the nozzle itself. We're going to assign its rotation to be the quaternion dot angle axis. And we're going to take in that angle that we're going to be using that we just created here. And then we know that we're going to be affecting the, is it transform or vector 3? Vector 3 dot forward. And that's just going to do the z-axis. I hit save, coming back to the spawn nozzle now. And let's just say that I want this to be, ooh, I missed one thing. You'll see what I mean. This will be a learning moment for everybody. We'll go to spawn nozzle, and I want to set the maximum angle to say, let's say 90 degrees. And I want this to go fairly fast. And let's just see what happens. Ideally, when we hit play, we want to be thinking in our minds, what do we expect to see have happen, and what is the end result? And so the spawn nozzle is moving, and it's sort of like coming out of the nozzle at the sort of what we expect, right? That's great, but the angle is only fixed on one side. And so we need to adjust the code just a little bit. So right before we feed this into angle axis, we want to take this angle and we want to have an offset to it. And so the offset is going to be angle max divided by 2. So that the value that we get is going to be between a positive and negative half of our maximum angle. Now that we've added that, then we should be able to see that our spawn nozzle is moving back and forth. Ooh, did I not do that right? Let's see. Sometimes when I go too quickly, maybe Unity didn't recompile. Yeah. So I think that the code was correct. It just didn't, the changes didn't take. Cool. And let's just double check. One of the things that we need to match up now is there's the frequency that we go back and forth, or the period to which that we hit all of our angles. But then it might be pointless if the interval that we actually spawn is at an inconvenient, or one that doesn't match up meaningfully to the varying angles. So let's decrease our spawn angle now to something like 0.2. We're definitely going to see a lot more. And let's see if this works. And this could be a point where it's obviously to taste how quickly you want this angle to be moving, how often, or how wide this angle is. And you can see these grains are now moving or spreading out pretty well. Cool. And if I were to draw, or if they were to pile up, let's see what it looks like if they were to pile up. Would there be a nice distribution, a little hill of grains when we are going? One thing that adds to not the hill, which I think is okay, is that these are circular and not square. So this could be a time too that we could change our sprites, and we can make a square grain if we want to. Let's see, how much time do we have left? If we have more time, then let's not. Let's make our remix version circles today. And let's just keep plowing forward. So we have this here, and we have the spawn nozzle. We want to be moving this one here. One other thing that could help us exaggerate the angle is we know by mathematics that if the angle is actually halved if we just rotate it here, but if I take the potential nozzle and I can do a little offset by just increasing the distance from the end of the nozzle. So let's say the spawn point is here. I can go like this, and it'll feel more drastic in terms of where the grains are coming from. And I can deactivate the sprite renderer now. This was mainly a cue for us. I thought I deactivated it. Sugar sprites. Oh, is this one here? We don't need this one. Yep. Cool, let's try one more time. Ideally, we want to match up the boundaries that the spawn point is with the edge of this actual nozzle. We can raise it up. Cool, so in this case, we could decrease the maximum angle. So let's make this maybe, I don't know, 75 degrees. And let's make it a little bit faster. 200. And we can call the grain spawner to actually spawn a little bit more. Now we are just sort of making it getting close to where we want things to be. I didn't want to move it that way. I wanted to move this one. This one should be close to around here. Cool. We can see that there's a definite period between the movement. And we can actually make this spawn point a little bit closer to the nozzle itself, because the grains are sort of appearing far away from the actual spout. I think that's pretty good. There, look like that. And yeah, cool. Let's try one more time, and then I'll be less nitpicky because we are running out of time. Okay, cool. At this point, we have this cup, and we can define some things for this cup. We know that this cup is going to be where the grains ultimately lie. and we want to add some things like a box collider. Nope, not a regular box collider. We have box collider 2D, and the most important part of it is this one right here. And we could make a separate object that's a child of this object. Let's see. Let's just try right here, and no, let's do the cup. We're gonna keep it clean and dirty today. Well, not clean and dirty. That's sort of opposites. We're gonna make it, we'll make it real nasty today. So we're gonna go here, and this is gonna be top of cup, and this top of cup is gonna have. It's gonna start right around here. We're gonna do box collider 2D. We're gonna define it like this. Really gotta make it into this cup. We'll make sure that the top of this cup doesn't interfere too much with this other one. You could do some polygon editing if you want to. If you don't want to use a box collider, we'll figure that out later. Here we're gonna have this box collider, and we can have some logic like I'm gonna add a new script. This is where some planning definitely would help out in saying that what objects are going to be controlling other things. Let's say this is going to be grain collision. And let's do it a couple ways. Let's say on collision enter. Oop. Let's just have a writer do it for me on collision. On collision enter 2D. Then let's do destroy collision.game object. Debug.log, grain, met goal. Getting close to time, I feel like. 14 minutes. Okay. Cool. That should be fine. And some things that we could save some time on. It's really up to you depending on what the system that you're building. I'm gonna assign the grains to belong to a certain layer. So I'm gonna add a new layer and say that it belongs to a grain layer. And I want this top of cup to belong also to the grain layer. So it's, and then we're gonna say, that's fine. At the moment, we don't have any other objects. So that step might not be necessary. We'll see. Great. Grain met goal, and we've hit so many right there. Excellent. Great. Let's create on this cup. Let's add. Do we want to do it on the cup? Yeah, let's do it on the cup. On the cup, I'm gonna. Oh, I didn't need to click on that. That's gonna waste time. I'm adding a text mesh pro text object with a canvas that I'm going to change to constant pixel size, and this canvas is going to be screen space overlay. Nope, it's going to be world space canvas. It's going to be on the UI layer. It's going to be this one right here. Text Mesh Pro, where are you? Okay, this is going to be some number. We'll say it's going to be 100. Where are you right now? Let's reset this to be its positioning. Where do we see you? Gigantic. Way too big. You are way too big. Wow, I can't render it that small. Great. Okay, maybe we'll do something else. Auto side, nope. I feel like I'm cheating right now. So I'm rescaling the canvas, setting the Text Mesh Pro there. We'll set the vector color to be red, and just try to reposition everything nicely. The canvas is right here in the middle of the cup. I want the text to also be right in the middle. Oh yeah, the Text Mesh Pro is kind of weird in that like the positioning is the rect is different than the positioning of the text. So okay, cool. Top of cup. Top of cup has the grain collision count, doing the collision stuff. So we're gonna say serialized field, and this is gonna be private int grain goal, and we need a reference to our Text Mesh Pro field, Text Mesh Pro object. Grain text. Probably wants it all lowercase, doesn't it? You do. And grain text. Oh, no, we're going to just drag it into the field. But we do want to set the grain text dot text to be the grain goal at the start. Dot to string. And every time that we delete something, then we're going to say grain goal -1. This is going to be nasty and dirty. So 8 minutes. Cool. Did a little bit less than I thought we would do, but we'll see. Hopefully we can get this to a wrapped up level. Green goal should have been, let's set it to 200. I didn't set the reference to the text object. There we go. and some of these are flying out, but the number is decreasing, which is awesome. I think this might be a little too wide, but that's okay. So as these numbers go down, it's going to ultimately turn into a negative number, and then we'll figure out what we want to do with it. So let's just make sure that we actually give ourselves a little bit of space here. This, cool. And let's just add some more logic here. If we'll insert it right here. If grain goal equals less than or equal to 0, then we want to display something. And at this point, I think that we're running out of time. So what is it, 6 minutes? Let's see if we can try real hard. Let's go to, let's just put something like this, debug.log. And this is going to be U1. Cool. The logic is going to be different if we have more than one mug, obviously, because we want to fulfill all the mugs. And let's decrease this grain goal, top of cup, grain goal to be 10. And we'll hit play. Ooh. Oh yeah. And so if it's and we might do thing like this is the point where like this is where we signal to the game manager this mug is full, that this mug is full. Might pause the grainer, the grain spawner. Let's go to the grain spawner and let's set a limit. Let's go to serialized field, private int, max grains, and while spawning, and grains spawned. I'm going to keep track of how many grains are spawned every time. And we'll increase grains spawned. And if grains spawned is less than max grains, then we'll continue spawning. Cool, cool, cool. Let's say that we have, this is going to be kind of tough because there's no pause at the moment. How much time we have? 3 minutes. I think I'm pretty satisfied with things. Max grains will do 40, and we'll start from there. Okay. It did stop. The top of the cup did not stop displaying. Oh, green goal is, I swapped the angle right here. So it was saying that we won every time we got it. And let me see. If green goal is less than 0, then we have win. Yeah, okay. Let's go one more time. Two minutes left, and then I'll hit save. Okay, cool. So it stops at 1. Obviously, my numbers are off. Let's say that if it is, if grains are less than 0. I think that's right. Ooh, how many seconds left? 51 seconds. So I feel like I'm pretty satisfied. I think that we met most of the criteria that we set out for our goals in this hour and a half. Um, some of the things that we're missing are being able to go to the next level. We are able to draw and control our grains. We can display the number of grains that we've gotten, and it stops. And at this point, when we get to 0, then ideally we want to have another UI element allow us to change. But we got most of the stuff done, and I think that was pretty fun. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in seeing this package, please message me, and I'll make another version of it, or maybe build on to this little really short remix. So yeah, thanks.